this evening, which we started the show with, of course, Sakir Snarman, the interview I did with him today in Aberdeen, which centred on everything that is happening in Gaza and in Israel as well. We heard from the special rapporteur on what is happening in Palestine earlier. Let's get perhaps a different perspective. That's from Eylon Levy, spokesperson, of course, for the Israeli government. Mr. Levy, thanks so much for joining us on LBC and on the show this evening. When is the Israeli government going to produce compelling evidence that the Al-Shifa Hospital has been a centre of Hamas activity?
First of all, Israel has already revealed evidence of Hamas operations inside the Al-Shifa hospital on the first day, showing all those RPGs and Kalashnikov rifles. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen as many RPGs as that in the Royal Free Hospital, but you don't normally find them in a hospital. Yesterday, we revealed a tunnel shaft opening under the hospital, and we're continuing our search. Now, I know that many people would like, in the very first news cycle, the IDF to pull a Wizard of Oz, pull the curtain open and say ta-da, but this is a complex that Hamas has spent the last 16 years building, and a month to cover its tracks because they knew that we were coming.
Well,
we have reporters on the ground.
Of course, before the capture of the hospital, Ms. Levy, you will know that the IDF had said several times and had gone to great lengths to depict that particular medical complex as a headquarters from Hamas. Has the evidence been produced so far to vindicate that in any way?
And we are continuing to reveal that evidence, even if it takes slightly more than 24 hours.
So it will come. It will come.
Of course it's coming. Of course it's coming. And I'll show you, for example, what the IDF has been finding elsewhere in Gaza City. We've found tunnel shafts poking out underneath children's beds. We've found rockets being stored under a girl's mattress. We found bombs being stored in a kindergarten, rockets being stored inside science classrooms. We found rocket launchers with cables that lead into clinics and mosques. You know, just like British troops in 1945 marched through Nazi Germany and uncovered the evidence of Germany's war crimes, we are doing the same and showing the cynical way in which Hamas has spent 16 years embedding itself in civilian infrastructure because its whole strategy is based on human shields.
Surely you wouldn't compare what the Allies found in the 1940s by what you found so far in that hospital.
We are absolutely comparing the atrocities that Hamas perpetrated on October 7th.
Of course, but that's a slightly different point to what's involved in the hospital.
Well, Lewis, when we're talking about tunnel shafts underneath children's beds and rockets being stored underneath children's bedrooms, we are talking about atrocious war crimes, military using their own civilians as human shields. We are finding evidence of a vast terror state, a vast underground city that has been deliberately embedded under civilian areas because Hamas knows that makes it difficult for the IDF to target them. Look, let me give you one example, because I think there's some confusion. Some people, perhaps in the West, seem to think that Israel wants to target civilians, and I'll tell you who knows that Israel does not want to do that. Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Just yesterday, we declassified evidence, a telephone conversation between two Islamic Jihad operatives, talking about moving around anti-tank missiles in a baby pram. A baby pram.
And you will also know that the director of the Gaza Strip main hospital, which has been raided, the Al-Shifa Hospital, has said that the facility has now run out of oxygen and water, and patients are screaming from thirst. That sounds like a pretty horrendous act. You don't agree? You don't accept that that's the case?
No, because when Israeli soldiers went into the hospital together with medical teams and Arabic speakers, we delivered a very large consignment of humanitarian aid. We delivered incubators, we delivered baby food, we delivered medicine, and we delivered a lot of water as well.
But you know
we take that responsibility very seriously.
But you wouldn't pretend for a moment, of course, that the situation in those hospitals is anything less than extremely, extremely perilous.
Lewis, the whole situation is extremely perilous. Unfortunately, Hamas decided to declare war on us on October 7th with that horrific massacre of 1,200 people, and to wage it from inside a densely populated civilian area. We're doing everything we can to counteract that.
And Hamas is a terrorist state, of course, and is a terrorist organisation, and Israel is not. And so obviously the standards by which we would judge Israel would be higher. You would accept that?
Absolutely, we want to be held to the highest standards. We think that we're more than exceeding those standards.
With two fuel trucks going into the Gaza Strip so far, that's the highest standards.
Let me absolutely, because we have an obligation to ensure
for the hospitals.
May I explain?
Please.
We have an obligation to ensure that food, Medicines, water reach the civilians, but not anything that is going to be used by Hamas in order to rearm.
Water
Now,
isn't
at the beginning of
water
this
isn't getting
war,
through though, is it? They haven't got enough water.
Israel
They're
has
dying of
two
thirst.
water pipes. Israel has two water pipes open to the Gaza Strip, including one that we had to fix under fire because it was hit by a Hamas mortar. But I want to explain this point about fuel because I understand that it's a matter of preoccupation. At the beginning of this war, Hamas sat on a vast stockpile of 500,000 liters of fuel. That's enough to circumnavigate the globe in a Boeing 747. Not only did they have their own vast stockpiles, they also stole fuel from the United Nations, 24,000 liters. UNRWA admitted this in a tweet on the 16th of October that they then hastily deleted under pressure. Not only that, but when Israel hand-delivered 300 liters of fuel to the Al-Shifa Hospital last week, Hamas prevented the doctors from obtaining it and acquiring it because it might make Israel look good. So we have an obligation to make sure that humanitarian aid reaches the people, but we also have an obligation and a duty under international law to ensure that that international goodwill not be abused so that the terror organization that perpetrated the October 7th massacre can fuel its own war machine by getting more fuel. Many things seem to be running out in the Gaza Strip, but not rockets, which they continue firing at us.
Is there an upper limit? Is there any limit to the number of civilians who might die? And I understand the genesis of what happened on October the 7th, and I understand where this began. But is there any limit where the Israeli government will say that this is a cost which is too high, this is collateral damage which is simply too high?
Look, let me explain what the objectives of our operation are now.
I understand what the objectives. I would just appreciate if you could answer that particular question.
I want to spread out. I want to explain the thinking. We are going to destroy Hamas's terrorist infrastructure so it can never again perpetrate a massacre like it did on October 7th. We will not go back to 6 a.m. on October 7th, and Hamas can invade us at will and butcher, burn, behead, torture, and rape Israelis at will. Now, in order to do that, we're going above and beyond, trying to minimize civilian casualties as much as possible, while we are fighting an enemy that is doing everything possible to maximize casualties on its own side. It's why for a month Israel has been urging people to evacuate. I think it's fair to say we've surrendered the element of surprise by giving so much time for them to evacuate, despite Hamas telling people to stay and telling them to martyr themselves. We've been operating humanitarian corridors so that people can leave, and those corridors, our soldiers have been attacked by Hamas as we provided safe passage. Now, when the world ganged up on ISIS a decade ago, and Britain was one of the countries, one of the 86 nations that decided that ISIS can no longer be allowed to control territory, I don't recall British boots being on the ground in Raqqa and in Mosul as Britain laid waste to those cities in order to secure safe passage for Syrians and Iraqis while ISIS was firing RPGs at them.
I understand.
That is what we are doing. We are putting our own soldiers in harm's way.
I understand. But is there, again, to go to that point, you will understand, and I'm sure will be sympathetic to the fact that there are so many people across the West and elsewhere who are horrified at the sight, as they were horrified by what happened in Israel on October the 7th, are horrified by the number of civilian deaths. I know you're saying that you are doing everything you can to minimize the deaths. Fine, I accept that. Let's accept that. But they're still happening. And so I'm just asking you whether there is a limit to that, or is it all, frankly, on the table until such time as you have achieved your military objective, which we don't know when that will be, and we don't know, frankly, if it will come anytime soon.
Lewis, war is awful. We hate the situation. I hate the fact that all my friends are in reserves at the moment. This isn't a war that we started. It's not a war we wanted. It's not a war we expected. And it's a war that we're trying to end, and we're trying to end it in a way that ensures that Hamas cannot drag us back into a conflict again.
But is there a military solution to this over the long term?
Yes,
you know the argument.
The complete destruction of Hamas.
But is that possible? And B, what happens if it comes at a cost of basically radicalizing much of the young people of the Gaza Strip against you, and you just violence begats violence, and it's endless?
Well, first of all, there was an enlightening poll that came out this morning of Palestinian society across the West Bank and Gaza Strip showing that 75% supported Hamas's campaign of mass murder on October 7th. So we don't think there's much more radicalization to go. But I'll say again, if we're bringing in historical...
Well, does that not tell you something? Does that not tell you something about the political instability of the situation? And it says something about how unsustainable it is, and the fact that this is a whole group of people who are raged against the state of Israel?
Of course, of course. It tells us that we are dealing with a society that is clinging to an ideology that says that there is no space for the state of Israel in any borders whatsoever. That is the meaning of the from the river to the sea ideology that is being amplified in the West. But if I can address your earlier question, I don't recall in 1939, 40, 41, all the way through to 45, anyone saying that if Britain continues to bomb Germany, it's only going to radicalize more Germans. And I don't remember anyone saying during the campaign against
But it is
ISIS
a different situation.
that it's only going
they are
to...
not perfect
No,
parallels, as you know they're not. They
Nothing
are
is a
different
perfect parallel.
Yes, but you're the one who's brought it up, and it is a comparison which isn't especially helpful. This is a long-standing internal problem within Israel that goes back to the foundation of the state of Israel. And ultimately,
You're right.
isn't it the case that until such time as Israel finds a way to achieve a permanent political settlement with the Palestinians, that this is always going to be, Israel is always going to be in danger. And by bombing Gaza to bits, all it is going to do is prolong the agony for Israel and for Palestine.
Hamas doesn't want a two-state solution. Hamas wants a final solution. Hamas is a terror organization that openly says its goal is a genocide of the Jews and to murder every man, woman, child in this country. I very much hope that one day we will be able to reach a political settlement with the Palestinians and put this conflict behind us. But that will not happen as long as Hamas still roams this earth. Hamas has a long track record, its strategy for decades. Whenever there seems to be a peace process, it blows it up. It happened in the 1990s, in the heydays of the Oslo Accords, when they launched their suicide bombings inside Tel Aviv. And it happens now, as Israel appears to be on the brink of normalization with Saudi Arabia, that it's trying to destabilize the region. People who want peace, people who want to see coexistence, need Hamas to vacate the stage of history. Because a terror organization that perpetrates such atrocities with such horrific brutality is not a partner with which anyone can talk. This is a genocidal organization motivated by a violent and twisted religious ideology. And it is that terror organization we are going to destroy, just as 86 nations banded together to fight ISIS. And I don't recall anyone saying that if the UK continues to bomb ISIS, it's only going to radicalize another generation of Syrians and Iraqis. At some point a decade ago, the whole world realized that a violent Islamist extremist terror group cannot be allowed to control territory from which to direct attacks. And we're doing the same thing. The only difference is, Lewis, Gaza isn't halfway around the world. It's literally our backyard. If a soldier in the Gaza Strip does not attack a Hamas terrorist who's about to fire a rocket, that rocket is going to be fired and hit that soldier's house.
So to come back to the original question, at any cost, at any civilian cost, if that's what it takes, because that's what's more important.
We are going to destroy Hamas, and we are going to continue going above and beyond. No, because the way that you're phrasing the question seems to downplay our efforts to minimize civilian casualties.
I'm not downplaying it. I said in the introduction to the question, I said, let's accept what you're saying, that you are trying to downplay them, fine. But that the cost's still happening. You will accept that civilians are dying in these attacks. You will accept that. Okay, you're not intending it to happen, and that can be separated with what Hamas did, of course. But it is happening.
Hamas declared on us, and we want to end this war. And we want to end this war in a way that means that we're not going to wake up the following morning with Hamas invading Israel and abducting more of our children into the Gaza Strip. Lewis, I wish we weren't in this situation. I really wish I could wave a magic wand and make Hamas go away. But it's not going to go away if we ask it nicely, and it's not going to go away if we ask it forcefully. Hamas has forced us into a fight. It's forced us into a fight to bring back our 240 hostages, including our stolen children. And it's forced us into a fight to destroy the terror organization
Hamas isn't in the West Bank, and you still have violence and problems in the West Bank.
Of course Hamas is in the West Bank.
Well, it doesn't
Hamas
control
is a presence
the West
across
Bank.
Palestinian society.
But it doesn't control the West Bank. And
no, it doesn't.
And you
That's
have
correct.
problems there as well.
Correct.
So it's not just about Hamas, is it? It's also about the political situation between Israel and the Palestinians. And,
as I said,
and eliminating
the root cause. We can have a broader discussion, but absolutely the root cause of this conflict has been the Palestinians' insistence that there is no room for a Jewish state in any borders whatsoever. That is the meaning of from the river to the sea.
And is it also
Palestine will be free, so there should be no state of Israel.
And also, you would perhaps accept as well that there have been actions from the Israeli government over the years that have also made that potential solution less likely. For example, illegal settlement.
Well, what I can say is that throughout history, there have been numerous junctures at which when the question of partition came on the table and there was a prospect of peace, Israel embraced it. And the Palestinians rejected partition. This is a question that goes all the way back to 1948, when the Palestinians rejected the partition plan that the UN proposed and decided instead to wage war on Israel. But I think we're getting a little bit sidetracked at the moment, because we're focusing at the moment on defeating Hamas.
One final question, and I appreciate your time. You've been generous with it, Mr. Levy.
You've been generous.
Well, indeed. Well, there we go. There has been... I was at the protests, the marches in London last Saturday, reporting on it. I noted at the time you tweeted something to say that these people were rape apologists, or that this was the biggest march for rape apologists that London had seen. That was a pretty outrageous tweet, wasn't it? There were lots of people there, plenty of people who would have no truck whatsoever with the idea of rape apology.
Well, no, because Hamas on October 7th perpetrated brutal acts of rape.
But they weren't. But you will appreciate it is a little bit more complicated than that. That it would be perfect. You would accept that it would be perfectly possible to go on a march like that, to call for a ceasefire. Okay, you don't agree with it, that's fine, but not endorse the idea of rape and not be an apologist for rape. And tweets like that, what do they achieve?
You know what, Lewis? If some people think I went too far, then I will offer this. For every person who goes on the next march and takes a selfie of themselves holding a sign saying, "I condemn Hamas for raping Israeli women and girls," I will personally donate £10 to UNRWA or any charity of their choice. They should tag me on Twitter, at Eylon Levy. £10 to the charity of their choice.
But you would accept that it would be possible to go on a march like that and not be a rape apologist, and therefore your tweet was off colour, to say the least.
I think anyone who is telling Israel that we should abandon our 30 child hostages in the hands of the paedophile rapists of Hamas, because yes, there were acts of pedophilic rape. This is the problem with this. It's a problem with this debate. Yes, okay, but they're not saying that. What I'm saying is it's possible to go on a march like that and not endorse those things. They just want a ceasefire. No, but that's the problem, because anyone who is demanding a ceasefire that leaves our hostages in Gaza and Hamas in power is saying that the rapists who perpetrated the October 7th massacre should get away with it, should not be brought to justice, and should be left free to reoffend, while Hamas leaders are telling us that they will perpetrate another October 7th and another and a million October 7th, as much as it takes. That is the consequence of calling for a ceasefire. I understand people don't want more suffering. They want this war to go away. But when you are calling Israel to defend itself, you are saying that the people who burned whole families alive, who tortured children in front of their parents, mutilated parents in front of their children, who committed barbaric acts of rape, should be able to get away with it, and Israel should not be allowed to defend itself. That is the meaning of calling for a ceasefire, and that's why I repeat my challenge. Anyone going on the next protest in London, who takes a selfie of themselves with a sign saying, "I condemn Hamas for raping Israeli women and girls," I will personally donate £10 to UNRWA or any charity of their choice. They should tag me on Twitter, at Eylon Levy. I will gladly part with that money and be wrong and apologize to them for calling them rape apologists.
Eylon Levy, grateful for your time there. Eylon Levy, spokesperson for the Israeli government.